Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, remember that Google man-in-the-middle attack we covered last week? Well, it turns out it was far worse than we knew. We've got the details on DigiNotar's compromise, plus a bunch of sites had their DNS hijacked. And after all of that, we'll cover why it's a great idea to run DNS at home and how Allan and I got our start in the IT world. All that and more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. And welcome back to TechSNAP. My name is Chris, and joining me on the Skype line, like every single week right here on TechSNAP, is Allan. Hey there, Allan.
Hey, Chris.
Welcome back to the show, Allan. Now, also I should say thank you for joining me last week on the Linux Action Show.
No problem.
You, Allan, really though, people should know, Allan probably had what? 30 minutes of notice, really, before the show started.
That's about it, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like people who watch the episode, they're like, oh yeah, that was a pretty good episode. You know, Allan does a pretty good job, but they have no idea that like you really had no idea. It was just kind of a last minute thing. So thank you.
Yep.
You can, if you'd like to see that episode, it's Linux Action Show, season 18, episode 5, and it's also the one in which I reviewed Mandriva.
Mm-hmm.
So go check that out. Now, this is, of course, TechSNAP episode 22, and it was recorded on Thursday, September 8th, 2011, for release on Friday, September 9th, 2011. And also, before we move on, I want to give a thanks to our Reddit page at links.techsnap.tv. Some of the stories in today's show, especially in the roundup, came from there. And we're always looking for more people to join the Reddit or the subreddit page there and submit stories and questions. In fact, one of the questions in today's show came from there. So that's very cool.
And a lot of the news stories come there, or we get extra details from there. And It's very nice when people submit stories, because it's easier for us to tell what the audience wants us to talk about when they tell us.
Yep, exactly. Yep. That way we know what you guys are interested in. So again, that's links.techsnap.tv to check that out. All right, Alan, well, speaking of all that news, should we jump into it? Get ready?
Sure.
Now, today's first story is sort of a follow-up to a major story that broke, and then we expected, continue to break from the rest of the week. And now we've gotten some really interesting follow-up details. So remember last week we sort of started this as this was used as to do a Google man-in-the-middle attack, and then it sort of evolved, and we started giving people a little information about DigiNotar and maybe the fact that they had been compromised and issued at least some bad certificates. But now we've got a lot more information, don't we?
Yes. Specifically, once the Dutch government stepped in, because DigiNotar issues the certificates for the Dutch government's electronic system, specifically voting, tax paying, and basically any interactions with the government can all be done digitally based on these more advanced certificates, where basically a certificate where you use a certificate on both sides. Instead of just using a certificate to verify that the website is real, users are issued a certificate to prove their own identity.
Yeah, so it's like one part. It's a way for the citizens to prove who they are. It's like this DigiD system, right? That's what they call it, where they do where the reason why they have to be able to prove who they are, is because they do like all kinds of things through there that
including
I don't think
paying their taxes.
Yeah, and of course all of the SSL stuff for that was issued by DigiNotar, right? So
exactly,
that's why the Dutch government was like, we've got to look into this. We've got to research what this was all about.
And so they've basically seized the entire company and are running their own separate audit. And as part of that, they sent the complete list of certificates that had been issued to some of the sites that had these certificates issued for them. So specifically, the Tor project was one of the sites that had a fake SSL certificate issued to it.
No kidding.
And so the Dutch government contacted them and said, here's a list of certificates that have been issued. And that was then posted online. And so, yes, remember we heard that, there was a bunch of certificates and they revoked them all, but maybe missed the Google one. Turns out, in the end, 531 certificates were issued.
That's a really scary number. And there's things in there like login.live.com, skype.com, tons of Google properties in there. AOL.com is in there. And again, that means that if you're in, say, like, it was only affect people in Iran, right? But if you're in Iran or something like that, you go to those sites, even with SSL enabled, they're still able to read everything in that transmission. Exactly. If somebody's sitting in the middle.
And anybody who can snoop or can inject traffic into your internet would be able to perform this attack on you if they had the certificate.
So ISP, the government.
Yeah. And one of the other things about this was that they also targeted a bunch of VPNs, like logmein.com and the Tor project.
That makes sense, right?
Because those are the type of things used by people in the country that don't want the government snooping on them.
Yeah, you hide. Yeah, boy, that makes sense. That's exactly what you'd want to go after.
The thing that makes this more serious is especially people that are doing that are like dissidents and people that are anti-government. We're not anti-government in general, but just against the current Iranian government, which is,
Yeah, definitely they don't have the interest of the established controlling power in their best mind. And so it's in that controlling power's best interest to know exactly what they're doing.
Right. So in this case, if they intercepted the emails from one of these political dissidents, then they might throw that person in jail or kill them. And so, this isn't just a theoretical exercise about security. This is, this could actually mean people going to jail or being killed because they were saying things against the government in a country where that's not allowed.
Well, that's definitely the downside of it. I mean, I've always thought of it as something like to acquire user accounts and do more like corporate hacking or spying and things like that. But I guess...
Right. But in this case, it's actually the government spying on its citizens to try to stop the overthrow of the government. As we saw this happen in a lot of Arab countries this year, right?
So the chat room asked the question then, does this sound like it was a government attack? Does this sound like it was the act of some sort of government agency?
Is from what we hear, it was one hacker, the same one that broke into Komodo, and also claims to have broken into other certificate authorities, who did it and said he's not part of the Iranian government.
Now, the ties, he's come out and said... So I think it was some newspaper put out that they'd noticed his Pastebin account had been inactive until March, and then after this recent thing, it was updated, and then he put out something on his Pastebin account saying, yes, it was me, and I'm here. I can even sign this executable with a key, right? Isn't that so? Yeah. At least he's publicly saying it was one person that the attacker is,
and basically it's the same person that did the Komodo attack. So when the Komodo attack happened, he created a Pastebin account called Komodo Hacker and posted details and proof that he had done it. And that account then went inactive until the beginning of September when he posted about the attacks on DigiNotar.
Right.
And again, he provided proof by signing a copy of Windows Calculator, with the fake certificate issued by Google, proving that he had the private key for the fake Google certificate.
But there's a couple...
And also... That normally the SSL certificate you issue to a website can't sign code, right? It's normally only has the flag set to be used to authenticate a website. So on top of the fact that he's issuing these certificates for sites he doesn't own, he's giving them features they're not supposed to have.
Well, okay, so here's here's the thing that I'm not reconciling is it seems like the whole exploit was used primarily by the Iranian government. It also sounds like there was potentially uses by the CIA and the MI6 and Mossad to issue false digital certificates via DigiNotar.
No, it looked like it was the Iranian government, this hacker issued himself certificates for those domains.
Okay, so you don't think then that it's just a way to cover up a state-run campaign by just saying, I mean, why can't they maybe even arrested this guy back in March, since his account went idle since March, and then all of a sudden it comes active again? Why couldn't they have just arrested this guy now, just post as him? They have maybe his login credentials. I'm just saying, it doesn't mean it's this guy.
It's possible, but the attack was only used in Iran. So now he says that, don't make an army out of me, I'm only one guy. And I hacked their certificates, and if the Iranian government used them, that was up to them. So obviously he must have given them.
Yeah, you see, that's what it seems like to me. Yeah. It seems like he's either a puppet, or he is not even the same person anymore, and they're just using his credentials and using his fame to cover up a state-sponsored action. Because the way that these were used, and the way that they went right up to the government chain immediately, it just, to me, it's a lot of coincidences, and it's really convenient to take a well-known attacker who's done something similar, use his credentials, and also, didn't he supposedly cite some sort of political agenda about something that happened in 1995? I mean, that was like his supposed motivation for doing this. And that just also feels like, as soon as I heard that, before I heard anything else, I was like, man, that just sounds like some sort of BS thing that somebody plucked that's not controversial anymore.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm a little suspicious, to be honest with you. And I hate to be the crackpot conspiracy guy all the time, but if you just look at things in a different light, it just seems like maybe they're just trying to use the bad name of scary hackers to get away with something.
But it does look like it was the same person that did the Komodo attack, but again, that one was only used by the Iranian government. So he has some connection to the Iranian government.
So he could be a contractor.
Exactly.
Or,
that's probably the most likely situation.
Yeah.
Is that he's some quite talented individual being paid to do this.
Yes, and probably some quite talented sums of money, I would assume, because he seems like the perfect it seems like it'd be the perfect scenario to have some sort of rogue attacker that goes out there and makes a big stink and takes all of the attention, and all you have to do is just finance him a little bit and get the results you want, and let him take all the attention.
What's called plausible deniability.
Exactly.
It's like, it was just this one guy.
Yeah. It just seems really like that's what it is here.
And his certificates were only ever used in Iran. It's and it could have only been used with cooperation from the ISPs or the government. So
right. Yeah, specifically in the setup too, because in Iran, so many of the resources that they target are out of country that you really have to be at the border, which really means cooperation with the government and the ISPs.
Yeah.
So you have to, because you can't just compromise all of the border routers and ISPs. You have to have cooperation.
Right, especially because you're going to be changing the traffic and redirecting it.
Yeah, I mean, it's some serious work
there. Basically, this is them doing the same thing that Pakistan's doing, but in a more direct way. Right? Pakistan's like, we want to be able to snoop all traffic, so you can't encrypt anything.
Right. No VPNs for you.
And if it's encrypted, we'll block it. In Iran, they're like, we'll just get fake certificates and snoop it anyway.
Well, see, that's really the better way, because then everybody just operates under the assumption of safety, because there's no warning, because everything looks like it's working. The SSL system's working on trusting what these people have issued.
So, traditionally what they would do was what's called SSL stripping, where basically they would just do it all over not SSL. And, when the site redirected you, you would just say, no, don't actually do it over SSL. Or they would act as a proxy, when Google forces SSL, they would do the SSL on their side, but the end user would never see the SSL, and so everything would not be encrypted.
Right.
But now, Google started building features into Chrome where it won't allow that to happen.
So, this is obviously, I guess, okay, here's an example of a way that sort of underscores the seriousness of this, right? And this is why Google's doing things like building in these protection mechanisms, because like we were just talking about the DigiD, right? For DigiID. Because of that, if I recall, the Netherlands is indefinitely extending the country's tax deadlines until DigiD can be certified as safe again. That's how, so think about that. Think about your country's tax deadline having to be extended because of some sort of hacking attempt or break-in. That's what's happened here. That's how real this is.
Exactly. It's basically all government operations now have to go back to being conducted by fax.
Yeah, they're actually saying use fax.
Digital. And because not everybody has a fax machine anymore and so on, they're like, we're going to have to extend the tax deadline indefinitely until we can fix this, and then give people a reasonable amount of time to file their taxes.
Now, there's been, I believe, no official fix from Apple yet. Still waiting. Everybody's freaking out because, like always, Apple doesn't say anything until they have something. Microsoft is issuing an out-of-band patch that should take care of Internet Explorer. The distros are updating. I have specifically, though, a link if you want to fix yourself right away. Throw a link for that in the show notes, for Ubuntu.
Yep. And Firefox and Chrome have been fixed for over a week now.
Attaboy, Firefox and Chrome. Yeah, Mozilla got all up about this. In fact, we have some notes about that.
Specifically, the attack happened, the first certificate was issued for Google.com on July 10th. And then between the 19th and the 29th, at some point, DigiNotar discovered the fact that they'd been hacked. But they didn't tell anybody about it at all until users in Iran started reporting this problem with Google Chrome, where Chrome wasn't accepting the fake certificate because of that hard-coded check in Chrome.
So they knew for a month?
They knew for over a month, and it took them a month to it took them a couple of weeks to figure out they had been hacked.
Or they were told to shut up. I'm just saying.
Well, no, they didn't find out about it for at least 2
that's
weeks
a good
after it
story.
happened.
That's what I tell people too. Oh, I didn't know. I wouldn't. I didn't know.
So they knew for a month and didn't say anything.
That's what it seems like.
Didn't know for the first couple of weeks.
God.
And,
So they didn't know. They found out. They said, "Oh, this was an inside government job. We better not say anything, or else they're going to come whack us." And then publicly, the rest of the world found out, so they had to fess up.
No, because it wasn't an inside government job by the Dutch government. It was by the
Oh,
Iranian
true.
government.
Well, no, I'm saying maybe they did an investigation and found it led back to the Iranian government. We're a little worried about going public that we just got hacked by the Iranian government. I'm just saying.
But anyway,
Just saying,
Mozilla says, because they didn't disclose when it happened right away, they are never trusted again. They are revoked permanently, not temporarily.
Yeah,
Permanently.
Mozilla's like putting the smack down, saying no more. You're gone forever, as it should be. They're not trustworthy anymore.
Yeah, when it happened to Komodo came out and said about it right away and started working with the browser companies to get the bad certificates revoked and sorted out. But DigiNotar knew for a month and didn't tell anybody, including some of the people that had certificates issued to them. Right?
Yeah.
Like they should have had to tell Google right away and the Tor project and all the other people that had certificates issued in their name should have been notified as soon as this happened. And they weren't.
Seriously. Do you want to jump on the next one because it's kind of related to this story?
Yes.
So the Komodo hacker has said, okay, so now I've got the Komodo SSL company, now I've got the DigiNotar company, and you know what? I've got a few other ones too, including, Global something or other?
Global Sign, yes.
Global Sign, yeah. And he's sort of boasting about the fact that he can just keep going, that he's already gotten 4 of them is what he said or something like that,
Yes.
right on?
He says he has 4 more that he hasn't used yet, that he has the ability to issue rogue certificates from. And including the ability to sign code. Like we talked about in the pre-show, with the ability to sign code, you could sign a virus as if it was legitimate. Or
Right.
you could make a fake version of Google Chrome with built-in spyware, sign it as Google, and when people go to install it, say, this exe is from Google, so you can trust it.
Or think about like a package repo for distribution, right?
Yep.
All those
exactly.
all those packages up in the repo are signed.
Yeah, so they could issue a fake code signing certificate and sign that.
So one of the things that the global sign guys did is they've already shut down, right?
He didn't say what the 4 certificate authorities was, but then later he came out and said that one of them is Global Sign. And so right away, Global Sign said, we're going to start investigating this, and in the meantime, we are going to stop issuing all certificates, just in case it actually has compromised us.
And interesting to note, Global Sign is like the 5th largest issuer in the business.
Yes,
So it's
and
pretty
some of the other big ones are VeriSign, Thought, and a couple other ones.
Yeah.
And, this could be a serious problem.
They're taking the right move though. They're shutting down because it's like I don't know. I wish there was some sort of system where you didn't just have to rely on a business to be honest, but I think it shows some sort of level of trust if they're voluntarily discontinuing distributing the certificates. They're going to say, we got to look into this.
I think that's important, and I think it's going to be up to the browser manufacturers to force these certificate authorities to do the right thing, or we'll put you out of business by revoking your trust.
Why can't it be something like a system of peers that it checks? Why have one single authority you trust? Why can't you have at least 3 authorities validate a certificate or something like that? Why does it have to be the system? Is it is it intrinsic to the design now? Are we screwed?
Well, no, the system probably could, but normally you only send one certificate, and it's signed by one authority, and then you either trust that authority or you don't, and that's all it really needs to be. But
these authorities don't seem like they're very trustworthy.
They're not. Well, basically, they used to be, and they've just gotten by not maintaining that level of trust anymore.
Right.
And they're going to have to go back to that or face the repercussions.
And I guess but see, the problem is anybody can get hacked.
Yeah.
So even if you trust them, and even if they've done everything they can possibly do right, everybody eventually, right, is probably going to get hacked. It seems like, I just go back to it seems like if there was maybe some sort of one central authority, but that had some sort of, multiple points of validation or something.
A web of trust is not a bad idea, and that's how things like GPG work, because they don't want a central authority.
Right.
But then how does it handle revoking certificates? If one of the three revokes it, does that...
Yeah, you gotta have some sort of system that really works for that.
If this guy has hacked 4 or more certificate authorities, then that kind of defeats the point of having to... Right? If he can sign it from 3 different authorities, then it's trusted. But, well, interestingly, apparently the Komodo hacker also broke into Start SSL, which is an Israeli SSL certificate company. However, after the Komodo hack, Start SSL changed their policy so their hardware signing module that actually has their private key was offline, and the CEO manually had to approve each certificate in order for it to be signed. Yes, and because of that, no rogue certificates were issued from Start SSL.
In fact, did they even catch one or something, or didn't they end up catching it? Yeah.
Likely that, or the hacker realized that I'm not going to try to issue myself a certificate because it would get caught because the HSM is offline. So maybe the solution is that all authorities go back to having a person involved in the transaction.
Old school, right? Well, it would take a little longer. Things would definitely slow down, and it would be more costly because they would have to staff up quite a bit.
Not necessarily.
You don't think so?
SSL certificates get issued?
Some. Yeah. But like VeriSign. VeriSign must issue a few a day. You know what I'm saying?
But a lot of them, they already, like, for the more expensive ones and the EVSSL ones, there's a lot of paperwork involved.
Yeah, that's true.
But for the cheap $10 ones, it's a transaction that happens in like 30 minutes and there's no people involved.
Right.
And maybe that's not good.
Yeah.
Like, it's
a little human validation.
Yeah. But again, it needs to be more than just a rubber stamp. Because, sure, having a person verify them, you know, they're going to look in, oh, yeah, that's for Google. That's definitely bad. But if somebody tried to get one for Jupiter Broadcasting, they wouldn't catch that because they wouldn't know that wasn't
It is quite literally harder to become verified on Twitter or Google Plus than it is to get a certificate. Right? Yeah. So, I mean, think about that. What kind of world do we live in where it's easier to become a certified Twitter profile than it is to get an SSL cert? I mean, what's wrong with that? That's crazy.
Well, and that's, again, the idea behind these extended validation SSL certificates where it requires really the same amount of stuff as the Google or the Twitter verified. However, those are a lot more expensive and dubiously more useful.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Should we move on to the next one or any other thoughts?
I think that's about it. But yeah, maybe the certificate authorities need to add at least a little bit of manualness to the process, so that
definitely some verification happening. Yeah, definitely,
and maybe more certificate authorities than just GlobalSign need to take a very close look at their systems.
I hope they're all auditing right now. I really do. I was probably expecting too much, but I hope they are all auditing because we are all so reliant on the assumption that when you see HTTPS in your browser, you're safe.
Yep.
You know, Amazon relies on that. Lots of Google services rely on that. There's so many things online that rely on that trust. It's been so key to online commerce taking off. I mean, I don't know if everybody out there who's watching remembers a time before when it was weird to buy things online. Like, I was one of the first people in my whole family to ever buy anything on the internet for quite a while. Was that ever like that for you, Alan?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then because of SSL, though, that's when people started turning around because the media kind of calmed down about it all.
Yep.
It was really critical to the online economy, so we've got to get this under wraps. And these companies, I don't care if it costs them a little money, they're holding the entire internet's financial balls in their hands right now, and they've got to do the right thing. So, all right.
Yeah. Now, somebody in the chat room just pointed out that the Windows update that disables the DigiNotar certificate is being held back by the Dutch government. So on computers inside their own network, via their Active Directory, they're not pushing that update out because it would break all their internal systems.
It's a tough spot to be in because they also have to realize that they could be using a completely false one. They could now they're completely as long as they keep it, they're completely susceptible to the false man-in-the-middle attack.
Right, but again, you know, if it's just inside the Dutch government, it's less likely that somebody's going to do that. But yeah, I can understand why they're doing it.
Yeah, totally.
Because it would break everything and they need to be able to continue operating. But they are going to have to get new certificates from a different authority.
Thankfully, it's not an impossible task. This is something that's a pain in the butt for them. All right. Something else that's kind of holding the internet by its balls is DNS. And and generally, DNS is a nice supportive cup, really. Not really much of a squeeze. But over the last week since our last episode of TechSNAP, DNS did get I guess I'll drop the metaphor, but DNS has sort of been under attack recently. And this time, instead of attacking the websites directly, popular websites were just sort of hijacked by getting their DNS records altered on them.
Yes.
And one of the things, Alan, that you pointed out, which is one of your favorite things to watch for, is a couple of the sites, or at least one of them, right, that was attacked was a news site. And the attackers put up like this fake, obviously not the right site landing page.
Right.
But they could have put up a completely, normal-looking register.co.uk page with fake stories on it or something like that. So I love that. I know that's always a hot spot for you. And that one thing that's always something I think about is these attacks. All these sites, while they weren't directly hacked, all of their visitors thought the site had been hacked.
Exactly.
So this DNS attack thing has a couple of interesting twists to it. But do you want to set it up and tell us what happened?
Yeah. So the telegraph.co.uk, which is a major newspaper, the register.co.uk, which is an online magazine about tech topics, we've used reference links from them many times because they have good coverage on a lot of tech stories.
Our last story. Our last story came from there.
Yep. But also ups.com, acer.com, and a number of other sites.
UPS, huh?
Yeah. And
very interesting.
Vodafone, phone company. So basically, the attackers used an SQL injection attack at the registrar. So basically, the company these places use instead of GoDaddy to log in as the users for like the register.co.uk and then change their DNS servers from the legitimate ones to fake ones. And then those fake domain servers said the IP address of this website is the server over here rather than the actual website. And yes, now it was just a landing page saying, haha, the Turkish mafia has hacked your shit. But it could have been a phishing type site, right? Like for ups.com, you could put up a fake version of the site and steal people's usernames and passwords for that. Or Vodafone, right? People's phone bills.
Totally.
Or the Telegraph and the Register are newspapers or news sites. You put up fake news stories. Make it look like the legitimate site. Put up a fake news story about a company and cause all kinms of havoc.
Yeah, then cash out on their stock.
Exactly.
Yeah, if you put something up on a couple of these sites, there'd probably be enough movement. You could probably cause a little bit of a stir.
Yeah, so if you can post something on the registrar like that, and then a couple of people tweet about it, and it spreads, and then next thing you know, it's on CNN, and it's not the truth. It's just because of a hacked website.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it can tank some company's stock, and it might not recover right away.
The register had to sort of save face and say, look, it wasn't, we weren't hacked. Look, we weren't hacked, you guys, honestly. It was our DNS that was hacked.
Yeah, well, it was even the registrar of the register.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, so it was their domain name servers had changed. So it wasn't that their DNS servers weren't hacked and their website wasn't hacked. It was at the domain name registration level.
I like Vadus Prime in the chat room who says, what you do is you combine this with the DigiNotar story, and so that way you can get people's SSL, you can issue fake SSL certs and then get them to redirect to your site. Bob's your uncle, you got all the goods. That's not bad. That's a good idea. Yep. See, he's got a nefarious mind in our chat room.
Now, the other thing that can happen there is people are going to trusted sites like the Register or Telegraph. Now, if you can put drive-by spyware on there, or other things that take advantage of holes in the browser or zero-day exploits, you can compromise all the computers of that legitimate traffic.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if you put up, spyware on some site somewhere and hope to get some traffic to it, you get a couple people. But if you can compromise a site like pbs.org that we saw before, or thesun.co.uk, or the Register, sites like that, and you put the spyware in there, then you can compromise the computers of all the people that visit that site.
That happened to a local news site here in the Pacific Northwest. They got their site compromised, and the attacker put spyware on there, like the adware crap. And then what happened is a bunch of my clients that day went to the local news website, and in one day I probably got I think probably 7 or 8 users that had visited the site, and I had to go clean up their machines. One of the things you skipped over though is I don't know if you mentioned how the registrar. How they got access to the registrar site, which is one of our favorite methods.
Yes, it was SQL injection.
Go figure. I mean, how many times do we say that? It's either a username and password or a SQL injection on this show. You guys, both of those things are easy to prevent. Seriously. Yep. If you run sites, go fix it. If you don't run sites, send this episode to people who do run sites so we can tell them, go fix it.
Yes, for sure.
I mean, really, the registrar of a site that holds the DNS records for some big sites out there, you think they would at least keep their SQL stuff patched.
Yeah. And the other thing was, once they changed those name servers gave out really long expiry dates on the DNS records. So even once the registrar had changed the records back after the compromise was discovered and fixed, people that had visited the site had that record cached for even days sometimes.
That sucks.
Right? And it's similar to the problem you had when
the
domain
I was going to say, we had our domain expire, this year or last year? And then when it expires, it pushes out new name servers for your site, so that way it can send you to the camping site. Parking page. And it was like a 3-day time to live. So for some people around the world, they couldn't get to our website for 3 days, even though we had it fixed within a few hours. Yeah,
so, somebody, the hackers that did this could have said, a month for the TTL.
That'd have been mean. Yeah, so that's one of the things, too, is like, that's one of the things the register was saying is, hey, we had it fixed, as fast as possible, but a lot of you out there are just going to go to the wrong site for a little while. So it's kind of one of those things where once the damage is done, it takes a little while to clean up. And think about if that had been like an Amazon.com thing where Amazon has said that they can lose, in a minute, I don't know if this is true or not, but they have said that they can lose $1 million in a minute.
I'm sure, yeah.
So, you think about the impact that being taken off the net for 3 days. For us, the end result was we just lost a bunch of downloads. We didn't lose any money.
Also lost all the email in that time.
It's true, we do too, yep, that's true. That was kind of nice. No.
But also, it can mean that you don't find out about the problem right away because you don't get emails complaining.
That absolutely does play a part in it. And if it wasn't for, like having a backup Gmail account or something, I don't know how. Or Twitter. I found out on Twitter.
Yeah.
It's just good having third-party services. Alan, is there anything else about this story you want to cover?
No, that's about it. Basically, 2 different registrars were hacked, but they're both owned by the same parent company, so they likely both ran the same software.
Uh-huh.
And it's a fairly big one that seems to cater to big businesses, right? It wasn't a GoDaddy that's, a bunch of little sites. It was, UPS.com, Acer.com, Vodafone.com, etc.
Right. Nice top big sites. All right, sir. Well, it is time for the TechSNAP feedback. Time for the feedback, Alan, and the first question up this week actually played off a question from last week. I'd mentioned briefly that on my home server here at the Jupiter Broadcasting headquarters, I run a local DNS. In fact, I am so geeky, I now am officially running 2 DNS servers. I set up a secondary DNS server to play with some software for this week's episode. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool to talk a little bit about that? And Alan, you suggested maybe we should kick off sort of a series of things to do with your home server.
Yes, a lot of people ask us, I want to do this or that with my home server, and so I figured maybe every week we can talk about one of the different things you could set up on your home server and what some of your options are.
And we'd like to hear some suggestions, so submit them to our Reddit page or email them to TechSNAP@JupiterBroadcasting.com for suggestions of what you do. I'd love like a point-by-point what you've done. Maybe I'll read a couple of those or something like that, but I will start with what I did originally. How's that? Is that a good place to start, do you think? Okay.
Sounds good.
So, I don't know, a year or 2 ago, well, okay, I'll back up even further from that.
Talk about why you would want to run your own DNS server.
The problem I had to solve was the fact that when I would bring on a computer to my home network, I had 2 issues that would happen. Is sometimes some systems would be able to auto-discover all of the machines on my network, which is a handful of systems. It's quite a bit. And then, or they wouldn't be able to see anything, and I couldn't connect to anything by name. And for the workflow of the studio here, you need to be able to have people sit at a station over here that's recording and connect to the editing station back in the office and copy the files that are recorded from the recording station to the editing station, right? And it's just not reasonable for me to expect that everybody's going to remember to type in 10.10.1.105, right? They're just, I can't expect them all to do that. So I need an easy way to be able to have everybody address everything by name without having to spend a ton of time on setting things up, making things work, and maybe editing host files or whatever I needed to do. So I just thought I'd throw a DNS server on my home server network. Now, years ago, I had picked up an HP Windows home server, like one of those little all-in-one units. I actually did a YouTube review of it years ago. And I thought, well, that'd be a good spot to start. So I threw DNS on that and then pointed all of my home systems to my home server for their DNS. And then I took that guy and I said, now, if you don't have the answer to something, go out to OpenDNS and go ask OpenDNS.
Right.
And that was my first pass at it. And then I've kind of evolved from there and done different things.
Right. So one of the reasons why you might want to set one up locally is it does caching. So if you have 10 machines in your house, when one of them goes to look up Facebook, the local server doesn't know, so it goes out to the ISP or OpenDNS and finds out. Now, when the second computer asks for Facebook, you don't have that delay of going to your ISP, which then has to go to Facebook to get the answer. It's already inside your LAN. So that can make the initial loading time of a web page cut down by 100 or more milliseconds.
And it's actually kind of funny because if you look at Chrome and all these web browsers, they talk about how they're speeding up rendering time, they're speeding up loading time. Sometimes you'll see down in your browser status bar looking up, and you can see that delay there. You can sometimes eliminate that by having something that's a little faster, a little more local. So that's nice too.
And that's the idea behind Google DNS is they're faster than your ISP. But if you have your own local cache pointing to Google DNS, then it'll be even faster.
The other problem it solved for me is I change out equipment a lot. We need more horsepower or I need to move things around. And there's scripts that we have and there's just training that's in place for the guys that if I have to tell them, oh, no, you don't go to that computer anymore, you go to that computer, it just gets confusing. So in my local DNS on my home server, I just put in edit Mac. And it's always edit Mac. And then I can go in the DNS server and I can change what IP that points to. But for all the guys here in the studio, they always just go to edit Mac and they don't have to worry about anything else.
So if that becomes a better Mac, you make one change and everybody's workflow stays the same.
Yep, and that's exactly what we've done over the last couple of years. It's really nice. So there's other real reasons you might have, and that means it's like, makes things easy for like your family if you've got kind of maybe a little setup at home and they're having troubles remembering the names. There's reasons to do that. Now, on Windows Home Server, I have used with success, and Alan, I guess you have too, Simple DNS.
Yes.
I have Simple DNS Plus, and I'm showing I set this up as my secondary DNS server just for the show here. And if you're watching the video version, it's got a really simple interface that it even actually has some nice little stats and stuff like that, and it has some troubleshooting utilities and things like that. Now, it's not free, but it's so easy to set up that you really can get it set up and going in like 10 minutes.
Yeah, and the other thing is, because you're using a graphical interface to create the configuration, it does all the validation then. Mm-hmm. If you're doing a bind with text files and you make a typo somewhere, the entire file won't load. Mm-hmm. With this, you're editing in an interface where it's not going to let you type in invalid data.
Yeah, so if you have a Windows server at home or a Windows PC that's on all the time, Simple DNS Plus is probably, if you want to, I think it's like $35, $45. If you want to drop that and then just be done with it, that's not a bad way to go.
But also, Windows Server has a DNS server built in if you're using a Windows server.
True.
Now, Simple DNS Plus will run on a desktop type as well.
I guess
has an advantage.
Now, but that's not what either one of us do.
Right.
Do you have a DNS server at home, or do you not bother?
Yes, I have a real bind server.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and I'm running bind on a little B3 server. I don't know if... Are you familiar with the B3 boxes?
No.
Okay, I did a review in the Linux Action Show, Season 16, Episode 1, and they are the size of a USB external hard drive, but it's an entire server with a hard drive in there. And it's an ARM box that runs a Debian distribution with a web GUI on top, and one of the things you can turn on is a local DNS server. You know what else has worked really well for me in the past, though, was I put DDWRT on a Linksys router that I just had, And DDWRT also has a DNS server. And one of the nice things is it works in conjunction with DDWRT's DHCP server. So when it hands out an address to one of the machines on your network, it automatically updates their DNS records for you. So everybody's names are always staying in sync. And so you don't have to worry that, oh, my laptop got a new IP when I went on the wireless versus when I'm plugged into the Ethernet, so the DNS server doesn't know. No, it automatically just matches all that stuff up for you on the back end. And that's just built into the router. Yeah,
it's called dynamic update. And yeah, it can, when you hook that up with your DHCP server, and that way, when a device's address changes, its hostname gets changed as well. And it's very handy.
I believe OpenWRT, according to the chat room, and also Tomato will do this. But if you've thought about, like, why would I ever want to replace the firmware on my router? This is one of the reasons, because you actually get like a little mini Linux system.
And we'll talk more about this as we go on with the home server stuff, but I don't have a router. I have my spare file server.
Yeah.
It does the routing, the NAT, it does my DNS, it does DHCP, it's the firewall, and it does, file server and a bunch of other features. It's even my stereo, actually.
That little B3 box has 2 gigabit Ethernet ports on it, and one's for your internet connection and one's for your LAN connection, and it can operate in that function as well.
Exact same.
My FiOS router doesn't. My FiOS router totally prevents it because they bring FiOS in over coax from the street, and then you got to go from that. So you still have to have the FiOS router.
So I have my cable modem, and then that goes to a PC now instead of a router.
Nice.
And that PC is actually a router.
That'd be nice. If anybody knows how you can completely bypass the FiOS router,
I think it's because the modem part is built in. You're stuck with it.
It's a modem router combo, and the data signal comes in over coax. And I believe like there's some way where you can set up a DMZ, and you can throw everything in the DMZ, and then you could put your own firewall in there, but you still end up having to go through. It's like you double NAT. You know what I mean? Yep. And
that's bad.
Yeah.
It makes port forwarding really hard to do.
Yeah, it's just I don't want to have to fight with that. So DDWRT, Tomato, or OpenWRT are the firmwares you could load on your own Linksys. Simple DNS would be the DNS you could load on a Windows box. Bind, Alan, do you have any tips for getting started with Bind?
It's fairly simple.
It really is, and most of the time the config file is pre-commented.
Yeah, and there's quite a bit of tutorials on how to do it online. Or if you use something like Webmin or any GUI like that for a server stuff, it'll be able to do it for you.
And Mandriva, which we reviewed in last Sunday, has GUI front ends to setting up DNS.
Exactly.
So those are all pretty simple ways to go.
If you're just doing it as a cache, Bind will work right out of the box. You have to like uncomment one line if you want it to forward to Google instead of doing the recursion itself.
Another good way to get DNS on your home network, and you're solving another problem. And maybe, Alan, I'm stealing your thunder from the future part of the question here, but why not do pfSense? Right? pfSense is a great home router firewall system that has a great DNS server on there that also does the dynamic updating.
Yeah, it's similar to the idea of DDWRT, except for you're turning any spare machine with 2 network cards into your router.
We got a lot of room we can go with this home server stuff, I think. So I think people need to definitely submit what they want to know, because there's all kinds of angles. Well, I have ran a home server in my house in some form for as long as I can remember. And it has now come to the point where we don't even have TV service in our house. We just do everything. We're more of a, we watch things later kind of family anyways. Yep. Everything runs through our home server now. So I'm really excited to talk about this topic. I always have been. So I want to hear people think.
I remember when I got my first home server. It was actually when I was in college. Roommate and I put all of our spare parts together, and we had to buy like 2 more parts, and then we had a whole machine.
Nice.
And
yes.
It went in the closet in the hallway where the router was.
Yep.
And that was our little server that we shared.
My home server, I know it was back in the early Pentium days, because I believe my first home server was my second Pentium machine. Like, I built my first Pentium-based PC, and when I was done using it as my main machine, it became my home server. And I remember just thinking, this thing used to be so top of the line, and now I'm setting it aside. Anything else on this question, or should we move on to the next question?
Yeah, that's about it.
All right.
We'll come back to this every week for a while.
Yeah, I think we'll cover this one for a bit. So, yeah. All right. The next question came actually from our Reddit page, which is awesome, and it was submitted by, Python for devs. He's got numbers in it, Alan. I can't quite pronounce it. But here's what he says.
Yep.
He says, I have a different kind of TechSNAP question. He says, Dear Allan and Chris, I'm a college student. He's going for his BA in programming. And I work part-time at my college's IT department. I enjoy learning and working on anything IT related, so I want to try and make a career out of it. Given my limited technical knowledge and experience thus far, I really enjoy your technical info in TechSNAP. However, I'd be very interested to hear how you guys got started and how you got to where you are today. He says, P.S. I wanted to post this on Reddit because I wanted to let other people hear about this. And then, somebody else posted and said, I really actually would like to hear about this. And it was also upvoted 13 times. So it seemed like people were pretty interested in this one, so I thought we could cover this. So, Alan, how did you get started in IT?
I kind of just I started my little business as a shell provider for IRC way back. After going through a couple of companies that kept going out of business, I was like, I could do this better than these people did, and so I did.
It's funny how it starts like that.
Yeah, and then so I slowly built up the skills on how to compile Apache from source and a bunch of things like that.
Yeah.
And then I ended up finding a bunch of other people that needed that, and so I kind of started working as a consultant. And slowly I just learned how to do more and more things and charged more per hour to be a consultant.
I don't know if I'll start. I honestly tell you well, go ahead. I don't want to cut off. I wanted to wait till I didn't want you to go into the industry part of it yet, and it seemed like that's where you were going.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so I'll cover how I got started, and then I'll let you get to the industry part of it. I got started really in school as a kid. Even by probably the 4th or 5th grade, I was actually being taken out of class by other teachers to have me come fix their computer during their class, so that way they could do something, because computers were very new and none of the teachers knew how to use them. And so I started in school missing class to do that, and then teachers started realizing, well, hey, maybe we could get him to come home. And so I guess at some parent-teacher conference, they asked my mom if it would be okay if I came home one time to help fix their computer. That eventually turned into a business that I started in high school to go around and fix the town's computers, which then, of course, was my springboard to get into my career. But Alan, once you kind of got that background established, did you first go in as a college professor and then branch off into more of IT, or is it vice versa? What happened there?
A little bit. Mostly I had been running my business and things were going okay. And then, so when I was a student, I met one of the other professors there, and we got along very well, and we would always talk about technical stuff. And later on, we kind of got to sharing work, where something would come in that I wasn't an expert at, but he was, so I would refer him and vice versa. Or, I have a lot of work, I can't handle it all. Here, can you do some of this for me? And I'll pay you. And, so later on, when he was taking paternity leave, he asked me to teach the class for him because they couldn't find anybody else. And so I stepped in and did that, and I ended up teaching for a number of years.
Oh, cool.
And then when he came back, when we were both teaching there, we ended up spending a lot of time together, between classes and at lunch and so on. And eventually that turned into us deciding we would share office space. We each kind of we're doing consulting on the side. And so we decided we'd split on some office space. And then that quickly turned into starting a business together.
Oh, yeah.
And then after a while of that, we were goofing off on our spare server, which was an old Google machine, and we invented Scale Engine by accident.
Really? Using the old Google hardware?
Yes. We got this old used Google server for like $75 for dual processor, single core Xeon. We still have that machine. It's our phone server now.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
A pig, though.
I got my start in the server side of things with... So as working for all the teachers during school, that eventually just led to me getting hired by the school district and working in their new IT department, which was new at the time. And one of the challenges we had immediately was to network all of these buildings together in this very large school district. It's large for Washington State. And so that, as a teenager, was a massive challenge to figure out. And I did a pretty good job, except for there was some wireless links involved, and back then the maximum speed of wireless was only 2 megabits. It was 802.11b only, and it was brand new. And what we ended up needing to do was prevent traffic that didn't need to go down to the other building to get, because that's where our default gateway was down at some other building, right? Because why would you have a router to the internet in every single school? You just have it where you have your main internet connection. But once everything got all connected, you needed to be able to not send traffic that didn't need to go to the other building because that was just extra traffic on the wireless line.
And it's very limited, right?
Yeah, and very limited. And you have to, it's a very precious commodity. So we figured out, okay, we need to put some sort of router. Well, what does a school have? Not a lot of extra things, but one of the things we tended to have a lot of extra was just like hardware laying around that could be sort of Frankenstein together and built out of spare parts. And we decided, okay, well, we'll set up a router and proxy here. And to set the stage for this, you have to realize that this was a Microsoft school. I mean, Microsoft had donated all of the software. Microsoft had donated all of the computer and networking textbooks. Microsoft was heavily invested in this. And so we were going to put up a Microsoft Windows NT server, although the proxy server that Microsoft was releasing hadn't been released yet. It was still in beta, this Microsoft proxy, which isn't even around anymore. It's been merged into some other product. And we couldn't get serial. We could not get it licensed because of technical difficulties and just all these other bureaucratic reasons. We just couldn't get this Microsoft server properly licensed. And so we thought, well, we know there's this Linux thing. We'll give this Linux thing a try and see if it can't manage, right? Maybe Linux could work as our router and our proxy server. And really, at the end of the day, after we had everything all set up, I had a realization. I mean, I had a complete and total 180-degree eye-opening experience coming from this Microsoft world and all of a sudden seeing this completely free open source thing that substantially solved this epidemic problem we've been having across our network, causing everything to be slow. And it was thrilling. And I think from there, I just sort of exploded into doing more and more in the server space, and then just kind of career leaped from there to the next job, to the next job, to the next job.
Yeah, actually interesting. In the class, the first class that I ever taught, the capstone project in the class was to build a router, a machine that was a router and a proxy for a business.
That's what we did.
And so it would block certain websites, aggregate traffic, because especially if you have that slow internet link, you want to cache images and stuff as much as you can to prevent downloading them multiple times.
It was amazing. Within probably a week's time, it became a DNS cache, it became a Squid proxy cache, it became the router. I mean, it was amazing. And then we would sit back and we would laugh at how long it would run because everything else was based on NT4. And a lot of times you needed a daily reboot back then. I mean, things were really bad for Windows back in the NT4 days. It was a joke operating system. And so here's this Linux, command line only, and we look at me, this thing's been running for 100 days. This is 100 days? This is unbelievable. So that really is just a snowball effect. You just go from there, and you meet somebody, and you start your next phase in the career. And a lot of times it's who you know and who you've met.
That made a big difference for me. Was just happened to find the right person.
And the only way to really meet people is just to start working and just start getting in some area in it. And that's sometimes been, I would say, if I could pass on a little advice, I'll reflect sometimes back on jobs or contracts that I've had, and I'll think, boy, all in all, that kind of feels like a waste of time. I don't really know what I got. But there's a lot of little things. There's relationships, and there's little things that you learn and establish that you really can't quantify, but later on do come back and pay off. And there's contacts that I made at some jobs that I probably won't even realize they'll pay off until years later. I can't tell you how many times I've met other people in my industry over the years.
Yeah, and again and again. The word of mouth referrals is where a lot of business ends up coming from. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If you impress a client, they will mention that to other people. So,
it also depends on what you're trying to go for. Like if you want to do something that's like site design or something like that, just show them proof of work sometimes, and that can help too.
Yep. So, and that's the other thing is sometimes you have to resist the temptation to do everything. Try to pick a couple of sub areas that you're good at and try to focus on them.
I would say that's pretty important these days. Yeah.
Yeah, because it can be very tempting especially when you're trying to make money, and it's sometimes the jobs are a little too far apart to start taking on things that you're not an expert at and try to pull through. And sometimes that doesn't work out well.
No, they just end up frustrating. They burn you out. The client's usually generally not 100% happy unless it's unless you have the capability of really just sucking it up and getting something done you don't enjoy doing. And that's always an option. But yeah, I agree. Specialized seems to be more and more important because when I started now, and really when you started, the industry was a lot different than it is today. Yes. There used to be a job in a big company where there was an exchange administrator, and all he did was monitor and manage the exchange system.
Yep.
These days, a large company could make an easy case to just have that hosted. I mean, Microsoft will host Exchange directly for companies now. So you've got to realize
as well.
And there's companies like Allan here. A company like Jupiter Broadcasting. I see no matter really for a long time, even if we started expanding our staff and grew out, why would I need to add anybody to the IT side for server stuff? Because I'm outsourcing all of that now to Scale
Exactly.
Engine. So, Allan manages all of that now. And so while there's still a need for an expert like Allan, the need for an expert to work for somebody like Jupiter Broadcasting is becoming less and less. And I think that reality could be applying to a lot of companies as more and more services are available online, like Google Docs or Microsoft Office 360. There's so many things now that used to be the bread and butter of IT, grunt work, like help desk and all that kind of stuff that is not really around anymore, or is evaporating at least.
Yeah, well, especially like even help desk, now that companies don't grow their own apps as much, a lot of companies are using cloud things like Salesforce.com.
Salesforce is a big one.
And so support for that comes from the vendor, not from the internal IT department.
Right.
Whereas
and in the best case scenario,
of that was, a company would hire a couple of programmers to build the internal system, a bunch of people to support it, the IT guys to manage the infrastructure,
and testing
and a lot
and
of
all
that.
Yeah.
Is the job still exists? They're just concentrated at a smaller number of companies, and because less resources get wasted that way, there are, in the end, fewer actual jobs.
Yeah, Osimo 2000 in the chat room says that cloud and plus outsourcing equals the dead of internal IT. I don't know if I agree completely, but coming on my 14th year of working in, or 14th or 15th year of working in IT, I definitely see a change.
Yeah, well, honestly, I've never liked working inside big companies because it's so hard. It
kills the soul.
Yes, it kills the soul, but also it's too hard to make a change.
Yeah.
Like to implement something new or to get anything approved.
Hey, I think I said in a previous TechSNAP, I think one of the issues Sony ran into why they got so behind on their patches is because a lot of times it's not the technical effort of getting the patches installed in the servers, but it's just waiting all the red tape of bureaucracy.
And getting approval to make a change that might break something.
Yeah, exactly. It becomes extremely hard on IT people. So really, you know what? Good. Outsource all that crap because it was always a pain in the butt to deal with anyways. I don't know what fills in that employment gap though, because it's not as there's not a one-to-one replacement. It seems to be people have to go find their own thing now to specialize in and to make money. Become an expert in something that you're really good at, and hopefully the rest takes care of itself. And then you just find more opportunities for employment, and you just build and build and build from there.
Yep.
What do you think, Allan? You think that's everything for the feedback?
I think so.
All right, dude. You know what that means? It's time for the roundup. Welcome to the Roundup segment. Now, the Roundup segment is stories that we've collected for you that we either didn't have time to go into all of the way or just didn't think fit in this week's episode, but still thought they might be worth your attention, so they are included in the show notes for further reading if you would like to do so. And, of course, I have a feeling you're all going to like to do so for this first story because it involves the ladies. And honestly, I'm just going for the gratuitous grab here. I just think this is great. It's funny that I use that term grab. Maxim.com did a photo shoot, unlike any other photo shoot I've ever seen before, in front of their IT rack in their office.
That is awesome.
And I just thought, like, they've got sexy shots of the switch, and here's the KVM, and here's the hard drive array. And I just thought to myself, what world do we now live in? What's that girl doing there? No, I just think it's funny that we now live in a world where a girl's posing in front of server equipment. So I've included a link to the full video in the show notes. If you want to celebrate this important point in our culture, our geek culture, you can go there and, of course, see the entire video.
I remember back in the olden days of the internet, there was a website called ratemyrack.com. And it was obviously not safe for work, but the number one rated item on the site for the entire history of the site was somebody's server rack.
Yes, love it. I love that. All right, Allan, the next story on the roundup is yours, and it's about DNS and getting off everyone's lawn.
Every DNS, a service that used to provide name server hosting for a lot of people, is shutting down.
Yeah, on the 9th.
It's September 9th they'll be closing, and so. If you use that, you're going to need to switch, but I'm sure you already knew that.
Boy, it's a DNS-heavy episode, but yeah.
Yeah, but,
DNS
every DNS used to provide a lot of more like a web portal system and a bunch of other stuff. And
they got bought up by DYN DNS. DYN DNS is not shutting down the chat room, is asking me. But
right.
You're right.
They're just transitioning everybody over to using their regular system.
Yeah. All right, the next story on the roundup is mine, and it's one that I thought was interesting. You know, one of the things we don't hear a lot of is Facebook getting hacked. I mean, sure, it happens, but as big as Facebook is, you know, there's claims that, although I've heard those claims refuted, that they get 1 trillion page views a month, which sounds insane. You think about the volume and size of Facebook, you're surprised they don't get hacked more often, really. Well, one of the reasons might be for that is they took a page from Google's Chrome playbook, and they're actually paying people to find holes in Facebook. In fact, Facebook paid out $40,000 in just a course of 3 weeks. The company typically pays out about $500 per bug, although one developer found a bug so serious they actually paid him $5,000. They're claiming this program is a success, saying that it's mobilized security researchers.
Yeah, is that it's mobilizing people that weren't going to try to hack the site for nefarious purposes to do it for money, and the people that were going to do it for nefarious purposes, it's like, hey, if I, instead of trying to make money by installing spyware on people, I can just get Facebook to pay me. I don't have to worry about getting in trouble for it, and it actually helps my professional credibility more, right? It's like being able to prove you got paid by Facebook for finding a bug is something you can put on your resume.
Yeah,
Hacking
totally.
Facebook and installing spyware on people's computer.
You can't really brag, no.
You can't brag about that, exactly.
So like I had mentioned in the tease there, Google also does something similar with this with Chrome. They pay out $500.
You're right. I think one of the very first people to ever do it was Dan Bernstein, the guy that invented Qmail, or wrote Qmail.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I know he had one where no one ever got the money because no one ever hacked it.
Oh, cool.
Like it went like years with no one getting the $1,000 he was offering because no one managed to actually find a bug in it.
That's pretty cool. All right, so the next story on the roundup, one more story before we jump into the Bitcoin Blaster, and this one seems like a win for the people, Alan. This comes from Torrent Freak, and it says that a judge is dismissing some BitTorrent lawsuits with a common sense ruling. What do you think?
Yeah, and specifically, he's setting a precedent so that this will prevent a lot of stupid lawsuits.
Yeah, amen to that.
Basically, the people that were filing the lawsuit were claiming that everybody that ever was in the swarm for a file was actively conspiring to deprive the company of money.
And how awesome is it that, I don't know if the judge had some sort of technical counsel or what, but the judge was able to see through that bull crap.
Yes, and I think that's an important thing, is that judges shouldn't be making decisions without proper unbiased background information.
Right.
But then again, how are they supposed to get that?
That's the thing, because you would think any experts they refer to are probably paid to be biased. But the judge said that just because BitTorrent users have participated in the same swarm at various points in that file, that doesn't mean they worked in concert. And furthermore, the Judge Zimmerman said that having around 5,000 defendants in one case would not produce and promote judicial efficiency. Right. And that it's just basically, that's the judge saying, get out of here. This is ridiculous. This is just impractical.
You can't just target everybody and hope that some of them will settle out of court and pay you.
No, and that's all it is.
If you want to go after the person that created the torrent individually, you can do that, but you can't target everybody and hope that a bunch of them will settle out of court and pay you.
And about once or twice a year, and I just saw one, I should have put it in the roundup, I see a story about some sort of news review agency or some sort of company affiliated with official Hollywood productions, and it always comes out that they're the ones that leak the videos. And there was just one that came out about a video screening house out of Switzerland that does some sort of production process to create the screeners for a lot of companies, has just been leaking the videos directly themselves. Just directly putting it on the internet. And you see this come up from time to time. So
it's like the ones when you see DVD rips get leaked the week before the DVD comes out. Yeah. It's because that system ships to the stores, so the stores already have them, and they're just not allowed to put them on a shelf yet.
Somebody at the store opens it up.
Somebody at the store making $8 an hour takes it home with them and pirates a copy.
I love that guy. Especially when it's the Blu-ray version. Should we jump into the Bitcoin Blaster, Alan?
Yes.
All right. So as we record the Bitcoin Blaster, the news is a bit bleak for Bitcoin. It's down to $6.36 US. Its total market value is something like, I don't know, it's down to as we record this, $49 million, which is
48 even.
48. Okay, which was it was like at 52 something when we recorded this last one. So Bitcoin took a pounding this week, and I saw a thread that picked up some traction on Reddit. I thought I'd throw this in the Bitcoin Blaster segment. He says here, the 800-pound gorilla in the room is the price of Bitcoin is going down because miners are printing 50 Bitcoins per every 10 minutes.
Yes. Now, while that is true, that is what's supposed to happen.
Yeah, that's the design of Bitcoin, right?
Bitcoin has always printed 50 Bitcoins every 10 minutes.
In fact, the difficulty adjusts specifically to make sure that a steady amount of Bitcoins are produced. And in fact, it's designed that in the future, it's going to reduce how many Bitcoins are produced.
Right. Once we've produced enough of the Bitcoins that there's plenty, the number will go down to 25 every 10 minutes, and then eventually down to 10, and eventually to 0. And the blocks will consist just of the transaction fees.
But the core of his argument isn't necessarily wrong in that there is just simply too much. It is supply and demand, and there's way more supply than there is demand.
Yeah, the rate of supply was always going to be this. It's not like it's a surprise. If more and more people start mining, the difficulty goes up such that it's never more than 50 every 10 minutes.
Right. So this seems like this is the design of the Bitcoin system is maybe intended to keep the value low while it's a new young currency.
What happened there is that the number of people ramped up really quickly, and that pushed the value up. But now the number of new people joining in is slowed down. But again, the rate is staying the same.
You also probably have to figure a lot of people who have hoarded are probably giving in now and selling while they can get something for it. Yeah. A lot of people have to sell more coins now in order to cover the cost of power. Some of the more serious mining operations, they sell a portion to make up for power costs, and if the Bitcoin is worth less, they have to sell more.
Again, with the cost of, with the difficulty rate going up, then yes, it's costing them more, and so they maybe have to sell a higher portion of their Bitcoins to cover their costs. And a lot of people are now less hoarding and more trying to pay off their credit card that they used to buy.
I suppose, to me, now seems like the best time ever to hoard because you're not going to get much for them, and you could pick them up for cheap. Although I'm not recommending anybody go spend any money on Bitcoins because who knows where it's going. I don't want to put that out there, but I'm just saying in my mentality is now seems like a better time than ever to hoard.
Yep.
So we'll see where it goes. One thing that's not helping, though, Alan, is for you video watchers right now, you're looking at what appears to be the Mt. Gox login screen. Maybe I'll just log in here and buy a few Bitcoins. Hey there, Alan. What do you think? Should I just go ahead and put my credentials in that login box? No! Because it's a total fake. It's a complete and total fake Mt. Gox page. There's been some phishing...
Earlier in the week, I got an alert from TradeHill saying that the same thing was going on.
Yep. Some couple of different groups have put up some fake sites, and then they're sending out phishing emails saying, "Oh, you need to come in and take care of your account. Blah blah blah. Click this URL," and then it takes you to this page that looks exactly like a legit Mt. Gox login, although the URL is bogus. But they even has accurate. At least I believe they're accurate currency calculations in the upper bar. Like they even took like the JavaScript code to produce that. I mean, it's pretty well done.
And some of them are having the name in the fake URL, like it'd be tradehill.com.somefakesite.com.
Well, and look what else they did. This is semi-adorable. Is they put the news feed on the side, including the issues about ongoing phishing attacks. They put the news about the phishing attacks on the sidebar there on the phishing site.
That's kind of clever.
But it makes it look legit, right?
Yep.
So if you want to check it out, don't use it. But it is probably up for a little bit longer, and I have a link in the show notes.
Yeah, and I think that something that could be important is taking lessons from actual banks and looking at some of their features. Like my bank, ING Direct. After I type in my client number, before I type in my password, they have this system where it displays to me a random picture from a pack of pictures that I've picked.
Oh, yeah.
And a sentence that I manually entered. And if that picture and that sentence don't match what I've picked, I don't type in my password. And because it's different for every single user, an untargeted phishing attack is impossible.
Huh.
If the user remembers to check for that.
One of my banks has used that too before. Now, the last story is just kind of a fun one in the Bitcoin Blaster segment. If you run a WordPress site, I know a lot of you out there probably run WordPress, and you sell some goods and you wanted to be able to sell those goods in Bitcoin, guess what? One of the first WordPress Bitcoin transaction plugins has been released. I haven't tried it myself. It's pretty new. It's at still it's a 0.9 version, but it supports HTTP and HTTPS. It works with WP e-commerce, which is another plugin package to give you basically a full e-commerce site, and it lets people buy goods paying in Bitcoins.
And I think the developments of things like this are what's going to get Bitcoin back up to being worth money.
Exactly. That's why. That's exactly it.
As they make it easier with Trade Hill buying Bitcoin.com, and this the software is finally starting to mature to the point that people are going to be able to create businesses around accepting Bitcoin. I think that's when things will start to actually go somewhere.
It's a beautiful thing, Alan. That's why I wanted to include it here in the Blaster segment. And then the other thing too is, speaking of businesses coming up around Bitcoin, a new version of exchanges, a more sophisticated exchange, is being launched. Something that comes maybe a little higher brow attempt, or at least the appearance of it. And it actually doesn't completely compete with Mt. Gox. It sort of rides on top of Mt. Gox. And I don't know what any of these terms mean, but maybe if you're a market person, you might. It says, this will be the first Bitcoin trading platform that supports market limit stop, trailing stop order types, and margin accounts. Which means you can trade more than what you deposit. And they also say that you have shorts you can do, or you can do basically the kind of sells that you can do more in the stock market with Bitcoin. So it's more of turning Bitcoin almost into like a lot of people use it to trade back and forth, but I guess this is a more sophisticated version. I don't know. I don't know anything about it, but
I don't know that much about it. But like the put orders they're talking about there would mean, in the shorts, mean the ability to make money when it goes down.
Yeah. I don't know, that could be good. Anyways, they're putting a lot of PR out there that they are like the new professional, all secure kind of thing. And so it's interesting. You are seeing some businesses come up around it. I would be really curious to see if we start seeing some WordPress-based e-commerce sites that accept Bitcoin. Yep. I would even be interested to see if you start seeing some WordPress sites accept donations with that plugin. Seems like you could just set up a donation package people could buy with Bitcoin. Yep. It's something we could even use to sell ad space, right? I could make a virtual good in an e-commerce store, and somebody just goes in there and buys ad space with Bitcoins.
Yep.
I'd be willing to do that. That's interesting. Alan, that's all we have for this week's episode. What do you say?
Yep. That was a good episode.
There we go. Yeah, we got a lot of good stuff in it. And of course, we want to hear your information or your questions and your ideas for home servers. So send those into our Reddit page, links.techsnap.tv, or to our email address, techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com. And of course, join us live like this awesome chat room has right here every single Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific over at jblive.tv. That's at 3 p.m. Eastern, right, Alan? 4 p.m. Eastern. Yeah, I'll never get that right. All right, everyone. But the one thing we do get right every single week is this is available for download on Friday mornings over at jupiterbroadcasting.com in audio-only formats, in mobile formats, high-definition formats, you name it. It's there for you to download. Or, of course, just streaming right from the page itself. As well as everything we talk about gets linked to, and there's always more information expanded upon in the show notes worth checking out. Check those out over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for tuning into this week's episode of TechSNAP, and we'll see you right back here next week.